Okay. David Allen,
Here.
Rob Baranik.
Somewhere.
Well, he's just getting coffee. Yeah, he'll be right back.
So he is here.
Matt Tuccini,
Here.
Dennis Smith,
Here.
Callie New.
Hey, Rob, say here.
Hey, David, I'm here.
Okay.
All right.
And Mary plans on dropping in as she can a little bit later.
Okay. So so let's approve I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda with the alteration that we'll get to the financial report amendments to the budget as Mary is available today. How about that? If someone would make that motion.
This is Dennis. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And looking for a second. Good, Matt. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed?
Aye.
Fine. That passes. Next is the consent agenda, which is just the approval of the minutes from last meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Callie, looking for a second. Rob, good. All in favor, either raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. We'll skip the treasurer's report until Mary's available. And so now we're to the first opportunity for public comment. Do we have any public comments today?
I'm not sure. We just had a Mark who joined. I'm not sure what he's here for.
Mark, are you?
With the Verde Group.
Oh,
Okay. So no one else for public comment at this time?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Next is announcements by the chair. I just have a couple things I wanted to mention. I'm in a couple of other groups that are struggling to tackle the issues around COVID-19 and the reopening and loosening of some of the guidelines and the new scientific evidence coming in. And I just wanted to mention, I know the city will also be dealing with all of this and will certainly be following whatever guidance comes from the city, the county, the state, the feds. But I just wanted to mention from my own perspective, I think the evidence is very encouraging about vaccines. So, if you have had a vaccine, if you've had both vaccines and have waited 2 weeks, not only is your chance of getting COVID much, much reduced, but even if you happen to get it, your chance of transmitting it is extremely low. And furthermore, your chances of getting very sick, even if you get it, is extremely, extremely low. Your chance of dying is almost zero. So for those of us who are vaccinated, and I'm hoping all of us can be vaccinated so that we can get together in person without masks, inside, I think it's very, very encouraging. I think the only real worry remains is that because it's so out of control in places like India and South America, there's a high probability of mutations and you can get variants, and some of those variants could even possibly cause some of the vaccines to be not effective or less effective. But the surveillance is so high that the chance of it getting here before us hearing about it is very low. So if that happens, we can probably change our behavior again in time. All that is my pitch to A, get vaccinated, and B, so that we can get back together and meet in person. So I know that's outside of our purview, but it does affect us in how we meet. So I just thought I'd mention that.
I second you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully the June meeting will be in person. That's what I'm shooting for. So
great. And then the second thing, I know we'll be talking about this on the agenda today, but this new project on the horizon that is just right now just in the potential stage, the vault downtown, at the old savings bank building. I was able to participate in an initial meeting about that, and I'm very encouraged about it. I think it's very exciting. So far, I've liked everything I've heard. I'm anxious to hear what you all think about it. I know, we'll be hearing a lot about that today and in the future, but I just thought I'd mention that, at least from my perspective, it's got a lot of possibility. And that's my announcements for today. Now report from Sherry.
We've had a couple of contacts on some potential projects this month that are just kind of at the conversation stage. Did want to mention that it is my plan that once the new city manager is in place, I will make an appointment to go and meet her and fill her in on what we're doing. And the same with Sarah Lucas at the Lake Superior Community Partnership. As soon as we can, just walk into businesses. So hopefully sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'll have a chance to make those, those involvements. I did want to mention that I suspect at the hearing on Monday night for the Beacon House, there's going to be quite a lot of public comment. I had a phone call from the UPA to Congressman Bergman the other day, and that aide is Rich Rossway, who is one of our former Brownfield board members. So he well understands Brownfield processes and personally is supportive of the Brownfield program. But he just wanted to have some feedback on that because he had been asked to provide some comment as well. So I think we'll be getting a lot of info on that. Also a board, the Superior Health Foundation, which I'm president of, I know has put out a pitch to have comments made, and that has been done. And I just wanted to let the board know I've stepped back from that, not feeling it's appropriate for me to comment in that role. So if something comes in from Superior Health Foundation, that's the status of that. So it's been busy, continues to be busy. And as you know, we've got some pretty exciting things that are on the docket. So I did mention to David that I need to leave by 9 o'clock for a funeral east of here. So if I disappear, that will be why, but presumably we may be able to make it all the way through the meeting with my being here too. So any questions anybody has, activities? Okay,
All
thanks.
right, thanks, Sherry. Next, we're to project updates, and first we have Founders Landing. I don't know who wants to go first. Mac, you usually do. If you want to start it off.
Sure. I'll just have a couple things, and we changed this to primarily put the active projects on.
Yeah.
And Mark can certainly comment on Liberty Way or any other items that may be there, but I thought we'd just put projects that are happening, that are active, that have a report there. And I kind of put a placeholder for Founders Landing. The one thing that I do have, I got some invoices from Barry. I was not able to get to those for this meeting, but we'll be having some invoices for Brownfield TIF reimbursement consideration at next month's meeting for some of those activities, some soil removal and other activities that were conducted. And another thing I didn't get to, Callie, is communicating with Dennis regarding sort of the site plan issues that you had raised last time in terms of pedestrian access and how that site plan operates and what that situation is. So we'll follow up with Dennis and get an idea about that. So that's all I had for Founders. Sort of put it as a placeholder as an active project. And Barry, I'm not sure if
anybody else have any other?
Yeah, I guess as long as I'm here today, I'll comment. 2 Marquette places under construction, as you see if you drive down Lakeshore Boulevard. That's slated to be up and occupiable by the 1st of March. So things are slow and more expensive, of course, but we're just pushing ahead with it. The demand for housing downtown is just incredible. We could fill the units we're building now twice with the waiting list we have. So again, we're just wish it would go faster, but that's the reality. And we are planning to get started on 3 Marquette, which will be a 3-story building next to the Hampton Inn this fall. And we're trying to wrap this whole thing up within the next 2.5 years. So it's been a long time, but it's been worth it for sure. So down on the Fairfield, that is they're scrambling to get that wrapped up. They're planning an open house, ribbon cutting on the June 24th. You're all invited, of course, and they'll make that, but there's still a lot to do. And as you can also see if you drive down there, the townhouses are well underway. And those are also selling very well. So lots of activity, and we continue to plow ahead.
I will just mention, I think I mentioned to Sherry already, I won't be able to make that Fairfield grand opening, so I'll be out of state, but I would have been there otherwise, and hope others can attend that. Anything else from anybody on Founders Landing? Okay. And then next project update, DLP Marquette General Hospital at Beacon House. Mac, do you want to start again, or?
Sure. Sherry had mentioned that, but the Brownfield Authority approved the Brownfield Plan amendment back in February. There was some discussion at the city level, but was brought back and will be at a public hearing and for consideration next Monday to provide Beacon House with reimbursement for up to $450,000 worth of eligible activities for the development there. So that public hearing is Monday night, and resolution for consideration for the Brownfield Plan amendment is on Monday night's agenda.
Okay. Anybody else have any updates on that? Any updates on any other projects that anybody wants to make? Mark, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to mention. It's okay if you don't.
Yeah, I don't have anything right now. But
Okay,
great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Good. So moving on then. No unfinished business. We have new business, and we're to Vault Marquette project introduction and application, which is the thing I mentioned in my comments as well. So again, I don't know, Mac, if you're going first, that's fine. Okay,
yeah, I'll just kick it off briefly and introduce John Julian. He and his wife Jen are the owners of Breakworks and are the developers on the project, along with working with Barry as the architect. And this is the redevelopment of the State Savings Bank and the adjacent parking lots that are along Lakeshore Boulevard. I'll turn it over. I think many folks had an opportunity to watch the presentation, the study session on YouTube perhaps, but turn it over to John and Barry, and they can kind of talk a little bit about the project, and thought it'd be a good opportunity for the authority to ask any questions, kind of talk through some of the stuff. I've got a little bit of information about the brownfield arrangements as well, and we can talk a little bit about the fairly complex nature of of agreements that will be kind of resulting. But I think the approach is to get moving on the brownfield plan, get that in place, continue conversations with the state, and essentially provide the developers with assurance, for lack of a better term, that there will be brownfield TIF reimbursement available for the project, an important part of their project financing, project development activities, and then work through all the details. So with that, I'll turn it over to John and Barry, and do your thing.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Mac.
No, I was just going to ask if you needed a share screen, but Sean is already on top of it.
All right. Okay, cool. Can everybody see our screen?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great.
In fact, I have it playing on my 65-inch TV. So.
All right.
All right. So I'll try to keep it a little bit more brief than what we presented at the City Commission meeting, but feel free to interject if there's any questions as we move along. And I wish my wife could have been here, but she had a doctor's appointment this morning that she couldn't move. So I apologize for that. But again, we're excited to be in front of you today and introduce the vision for the Marquette Savings Bank building and bringing the Vault Hotel to Marquette. And also looking at how we can collaborate with this development and create some new public use of this currently, completely private property. Make sure I know how to. PowerPoint. All right, there we go. All right, quick background on us, because we know you just really want to hear about the project, but my wife is a civil engineer from Michigan Tech, and myself, I've been in housing and really started in multifamily housing back in 2006, 2007, building purpose-built student housing in the Houghton market. But our portfolio really especially in the more recent years, has been around preserving historic buildings and doing complete renovations of historic assets in downtown. Specifically in Houghton, we've done 5 different buildings from the ground up, full renovation, full gut, and repurpose. Obviously, as I mentioned, we do have a large portfolio in multifamily and student housing, and we do operate a commercial and industrial construction company as well. And on top of that, we also have some lifestyle and beauty service businesses. We're the founders and owners of the Citrus Salon in Houghton, Michigan. And then we have a branch of our business that we operate out of San Diego, California, which is in the distribution fulfillment business and primarily in the music industry. We do music merchandising is what we really do in California. And then, on top of all that, we have a hospitality division that's growing quickly and excitingly. So, as I mentioned, we've been doing this for over 15 years. We've designed, built, and professionally operate 392 beds of purpose-built multifamily and student housing. And you can see kind of here just the different frames of projects, the historic projects in the lower left, the larger, more like dormitory style in the upper left, and on the right, the row house opportunities. So in the hospitality world right now, we've got 2 active projects. One being the conversion of the Franklin Square Inn in Houghton, Michigan. I'm sure if you've ever been to Houghton, you're familiar with this building. It's kind of a good or bad. It's an icon when you drive into town. We're hoping to really improve on that image when we come into downtown Houghton. But it is a 7-story, 111 room property that we're converting into a Hampton Inn by Hilton. And that project is a full renovation. There's not much of a wire, a pipe, or a stud left in that building that we didn't touch or replace. So a very significant project. We're hoping to be open this summer, late summer, fall, as we work our way through the COVID maze that all of us are dealing with. And then we also purchased the property to the west of this to develop a Town Place Suites. We have acquired the franchise, and we're actually going to be moving through the process. That will also be a brownfield project in Houghton. It made their DDA agenda last night, and we're hoping to present that in the coming weeks with a few different options. So, which brings us to our Vault Hotel. This has really been a vision of my wife's and Jen, and kind of a culmination of our work on historic buildings and our passion for hospitality. And I hope if any of you have a chance to come to Houghton, we'd love to show you around and show you what it's like at the Vault Hotel. You can see a few images of what we've done inside of this historic building. This building was a bank since 1887, and we were the first people to ever repurpose it. When we bought it, it was a Wells Fargo bank, and it had been basically abandoned and mothballed for about 1.5 years when we came into possession of the property. And we've hosted all different types of guests, from the Stanley Cup to Chef Gordon Ramsay. And I think most excitingly, over the last 1.5 years, have really found, and I know Marquette's doing the same thing. It's like there's a new traveler coming into the UP, and it's really exciting to be able to offer this type of experience-based hospitality. And it's really encouraging when you hear from these guests that are coming up that have never been to the UP, that they can't wait to come back and see more of what's happening in the UP, whether it's Marquette, whether it's Houghton, or the Keweenaw. So it's been a really exciting experience to have this more intimate opportunity to relate with your guests with the brand of the Vault. So one of our mottos is Old Bank, New Life. We've been looking at the Marquette market for quite some time. And, really for the Vault to work, it needs to be in a historic bank. And there's only a few options for that. And when the Marquette Savings Bank became available, and specifically with the assembly of property that goes along Lakeshore Boulevard, it was something that we knew we had to at least explore and try to bring a project to life in Marquette and bring that brand and bring that experience to Marquette. So part of that process, and Barry will get into this in a few minutes about how we've came up with the vision and the design and the operation. But we've traveled to a lot of historic and boutique and kind of unique experience-based hotels, and specifically for this mission. And most recently, we took a mission down to Detroit and visited some of the really amazing hotels that have been recently redeveloped from historic buildings, from the Shinola Hotel that was the Singer sewing machine conversion. It used to be a Singer sewing machine factory, and they converted it into the Shinola Hotel. It's about a 110-room hotel. And what was so interesting about that project is it's a lot of in line with what we're doing here, is that it's weaving new buildings with old buildings and making it really kind of redeveloping an entire block is what they've done down there. So we took Barry and our design team down there, and we also teamed up with an interior design firm that has been involved in the majority of the projects down in Detroit and kind of greater lower Michigan, Pop House Design. So we're super excited to bring them to Marquette and kind of showcase the brand of what we can do in this historic building. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Barry to talk some more about the design. And if there's any questions more from the developer standpoint, this would be a great time if anybody has any. Okay. So with that, I'll pass it off to Barry. And Barry, just let me know when you want me to change the slides here for you.
Yeah, okay.
I may have some comments and questions in a bit, but I'll wait till the whole thing's done.
Okay. All right. Cool.
All right. So when this opportunity came up, I was just thrilled because, of course, the Savings Bank building is the icon of downtown Marquette. It's been used over and over as what downtown Marquette looks like. Just a gorgeous building. And again, our approach to this project is to completely respect that. And we're going to very lightly adjoin to the Savings Bank, but also we're going to construct, go ahead in the next one, John. We're going to construct new construction on what is really a big chunk of ground. Again, John mentioned private lands, 2 parking lots that will be transformed into some new stuff for Marquette. Next image. As we start every project, we got to look at what the rules are. And our approach to design is to follow the rules. So given the downtown form-based code, we've laid out what can we do. So on the Front Street side, there's a little darker red line that is the G5 district, where that allows 5 stories to be constructed, and the form-based code requires you build at the street. The pink line around Lakeshore Boulevard is General 3, which allows 3 stories and then set back 8 to build 2 more. So 5 stories over most of that as well. We are proposing to build over the entire site, but we are also going to create 3 access points into the block. One being off of Lakeshore Boulevard. There'll be one actually behind the Veerling and Elizabeth's, and that will actually be creating an alley. There's a functional alley there now, but it's actually part of this property. So we're gonna give up 20 feet of the property to create an actual alley space. And then the third alley that we're going to be creating is actually coming off of Front Street, between the gap between the Savings Bank building and the building to the south. As some of you might know, historically, the Savings Bank was formed by the rail track trestle that went through that space that went out to an ORDOC, one of the early ones. So let's go to the next image. At the heart of this project, and really the real heart of this brownfield plan, will be a 220 car public parking structure. So it's private parking now. It's been recognized for a long time that downtown needs additional parking. This is a great location, given the use of the lots that are, currently it's always filled. And this will kind of be the backbone of the development above, but also just enhance it addresses the needs downtown Marquette right now. So let's go to the next. It's kind of an overview of the project. Savings Bank building up in the right corner. Again, we're going to restore the building. We're going to convert it to a hotel use. Coming to the east of that, we're going to have a glassed-in atrium that'll lightly touch the historic structure, but it'll be the circulation space with the new elevators, stairways that will function for the Savings Bank building as well as the new construction. Our approach to this project is really formed by our intention to respect not only the historic building, but the Veerling and Elizabeth's. Those are really we've always see those as community assets. You know, the Veerling was the pioneer in Marquette's rebirth back in the 80s. And Elizabeth has become to be known as one of the best restaurants in the state of Michigan. So we thought we could by right build straight across Lakeshore Boulevard, 5 stories, block everyone's view. But we decided we're not doing that. So we are the Veerling will still have a great view of the harbor, and Elizabeth's will as well. And so what that did is really gave us an opportunity to create 2 very narrow buildings. So east of the Savings Bank building, we'll be constructing 5 stories with a step for the hotel construction. And then the building to the south will be a residential structure. The green areas you see in between are actually the roof of that parking structure. Those will be a green roof. And those are actually below the floor lines of Veerling and Elizabeth. Next image. So following the form-based code, we're using multiple forms as we wrap around, really giving the Savings Bank building its own space. Let's go to the next one. See that glassed in atrium space between the buildings, and then using the form-based code requirements, we break the form at every 60-70 foot increment, and to really make it look like smaller buildings in the context of downtown Marquette. Next image. So coming around the corner at Lakeshore, along Lakeshore, we're other than that alley entrance, we're putting commercial space. This is a requirement of the form-based code, and it's also a good opportunity to bring some more life down onto Lakeshore Boulevard. You can see here we're building a 2-story step or block, and then we're stepping back to do those additional stories. Next, here you can see that that central area, the gap between the buildings that we're creating, and that gap is the width of the buildings on Washington Street. So it's really a substantial space. And you can see in this gap, we're also at the Lakeshore level, we're creating the entrance into the public parking. Also some outdoor space. There will be a 150 person event space on the 2nd floor of the hotel block. And then there's an nice outdoor balcony that will go with that event space. A much needed space downtown. Again, some more commercial as we come around the corner. Another piece that we're bringing into this is a maker space. This will be along the Main Street sidewalk side. And this is just a space that artists can use to make things, and it become an interesting thing to just observe what's going on in there, as well as a great space for things to actually happen. In approaching this, we looked at the new downtown plan that was created last summer, and this is one of the things that were identified as needed. More on that later. So you can see the housing block to the south. One of the things we really wanted to do was not crowd the existing buildings on Front Street as well. So you can see we're completely separated from on all sides. We're not pinching up next to them, even though the property lines do run tight to them. Next. This gives you a little idea how we're going to approach from Front Street. The idea is that approaching the Savings Bank building is really what we wanted to happen as part of this experience of coming to the Vault Marquette. And so we're creating this entry space will actually be a bridge built up over the space that's there now. And we really wanted to touch on that history that was in that space with the trestle-like forms. Let's go to the next one. So this will be it's a one-way drive in. This is where hotel guests will pull in, park, check in, and then from there, you'll be able to drive on down into the parking structure. Another element we've added to this is a walkway, which will come from that parking structure just for public use out to Front Street. Next. Yeah, next, there you go. Little Photoshop there, okay. So in all of our projects, we try to work within the context. And so here you can see how, the color, materials, the forms really fit into the fabric of downtown Marquette. kind of using that vocabulary to guide the design. Right, next. This is kind of, let's talk about the public components. As I mentioned, we looked at the downtown plan, and there were several elements that were included in that plan. One being, in the lower right of the image, you can see an enhancement at the bell tower. So it was suggested that a little amphitheater, a little Native American focused space be created there, enhance that entry and the connection between downtown and the park. And then over at the end of Main Street to create a little waterfront arrival point, a little structure of some kind, just as you come down Main Street, you know, and arrive at the waterfront. We're also proposing to enhance that Main Street walk, make it a little wider. And this is how the major circulation to and from the parking for the public will occur on that side. Next image. This is that entry off of Lakeshore. In most of this parking is actually, there's 4 layers of parking. One is down below grade, and this will be more of the long-term lease kind of parking. And then the public layers above are all above the grade, and we like to bring in a lot of light into parking structures just so that they're not dark and scary. You know, the public, you know, feels comfortable, as well as it's really easy to understand what to do. I pull in, you know exactly where to go, and you could kind of see your way to the side through the openings. Next image. This is on Main Street. This is kind of halfway up the block, where this will be the primary circulation space for pedestrians, with a stair and elevator inside of that. And again, you can see the amount of glass, so that when you're in the parking, you'll be able to see over this and totally understand what you're supposed to do. Next. Again, there's that public walkway. It'll be a covered walkway that runs just so you could also just come up to Front Street. Next. That's it.
And
Sorry,
Rob, I don't think we could understand what you said.
Oh, if you can hear me now, can you go to slide
Yeah.
25 that shows the public improvements?
this one?
Yeah, that one. Barry, you mentioned that it was suggested that these improvements be made. Is that from the city commission, or where did those suggestions come from?
The DDA had commissioned a new downtown plan, so that's where these things came from.
And then would those be like private investment in public infrastructure, or how does this portion of the project work?
We're proposing that those become are part of the brownfield plan. So the brownfield plan, Mac will get into the detail, of course, will include the public parking and then these other public improvements. So as we're proposing it, the majority, I mean, by far, the vast majority of the TIF dollars will go to these public elements, very little to the developer. So,
Barry, what is the increase in public parking spots?
well, there are currently 0 public parking spots,
Right.
and
Okay.
there'll be 220 in the end. And the idea is that the hotel will need spots. We're going to have 90 to 95 rooms. And so the primary time of that need is at night, which is opposite the primary time of downtown public parking. So it works really well. Basically, the hotel will lease. And what it does, it gives the operation of the parking structure a kind of a guaranteed income stream as well from that. There's also other parking needs downtown. Right now, the DDA leases space to the other residential properties that don't have surface areas. And so, it basically, the 220 spaces will be a combination of daily use with metering or pay stations and long-term leases.
So it is metered public parking?
I believe they're going to use pay stations. That would be the approach, but it will be
sure.
Like all downtown parking now. You will have to pay for it.
So you're looking at 220 minus 90-ish for public parking. So
And of that 90 during the daytime hours, you know, at least half of the 90, if not more, just drive by any hotel parking lot right now at the time of day even, and you'll see that they empty out pretty quick. But yes, there's definitely it's new parking for downtown.
And if I could add too, Barry, I think one of the key components of this, of why we're so concerned about having a public parking structure in this brownfield plan, is that if we look at the scope of what we're trying to build on this property, if we had to create private parking, there's a lot of issues that go along with that. And one of them being, as any developer would know, you would have to build a much bigger scale of a development. You know, we're really building a very refined scale on the property relative to how much land we're actually going to have. You can see that with creating these view sheds. You know, the way we're able to really do that is to utilize a brownfield plan to pay, you know, to help offset some of the costs and create a public parking structure here. And I think that's really important that, you know, that's known, because if we have to go on our own with our own private parking, that parking would sit empty, like Barry just said, all day long. And what a shame it would be, just like it is not these great parking spots that are all privately owned and very well metered as it is today, as we mostly probably all know. You know, so I think that's a huge component as to why we're going after the brownfield TIF, is to support the scale of the development that we're looking at. Because again, I'd say if we have to go at this alone from a total private standpoint, you know, we're going to have to build to a much larger scale to accommodate for those costs to build the private parking that then won't be utilized, you know, by the public at all, and would, you know, be really sad again to see parking empty in a very prime location during the day. So I think that's an important point to make, is, you know, there's other ways to develop this property. We just chose this as being the most responsible way to develop this property, in which we can maintain view sheds, add some public infrastructure, mainly being the parking, in addition to some of the improvements. So I think that's just something, as a developer, I really want to be known well.
And I'll just add in too, Matt, that we're trying to get a structure where there would be permits and accessibility for the hotel as well as the residents. They may not have designated spots, because that's a pretty inefficient way to run it. As long as they can be assured of capacity and we can manage capacity, it would be an effective 220, you know, public parking spots with permits, with leases or whatever for the other uses that would be there, along with other residents around. So, you know, the hope is that it would not have blocks of area set aside that's only used 30% of the time. It would all be available openly. So an effective 220 space deck.
John and Barry, thanks for your presentation. I really appreciate how much detail you've given to the form and the context of downtown. I think it's a really exciting development. I have a couple of questions. You haven't hit on the housing component and what the blend of housing units would be. And I understand it's all market rate. I'm curious from the brownfield perspective why funds might not be to support more attainable housing rather than the parking structure, since one of our goals is to support housing. Another one of our goals is to support walkability, and this is kind of the thing I bring up constantly, but you know, funding a parking deck is kind of in direct conflict of supporting walkability. I know that it supports the development and understand that, but wondering if you can go into a little bit more detail about housing, and if you've had conversations about funds going toward that and the blend of price points rather than some other things. Also really quickly, related to the public spaces that you've outlined, will there be public engagement for those? Will the community get some sort of weigh in about what those look like so that they are context sensitive? So a couple of different things, but those are my thoughts for now. Thanks.
Yeah, certainly this question. And I decided I was to try to do this outside. It's starting to rain and my neighbor has a jackhammer. I don't know if you can hear it. But so to address the housing, right now we have 36 units planned. There's a couple of 2 bedrooms, but they're primarily studio and 1 bedrooms. This is certainly the market that's out there. single people want to live downtown primarily. The other thing that we've looked at is the market rate. Now we're approaching this as market rate because we're not asking for anything to support that housing. Those residents will lease parking spaces from the DDA just like any other resident downtown. So there's no subsidizing parking for that in the scheme here. And just to touch on the notion of, the ideas of the full spectrum of the market of housing and market. There's demand at every level, and of course there's a tremendous demand for attainable housing, and we all want to do that. Unfortunately, this property is so valuable. The cost to buy this footprint, it really makes it difficult without some major incentive to not make this market rate housing. So, I don't believe a brownfield can be used to support, make some of them less costly. So, and if you think about it, adding any supply to the housing market helps the entire housing market. So what we've seen this at One Marquette Place is a lot of the residents, they moved there from a house that they sold. They moved there from a different apartments complex in town. And what that does is open up those housing opportunities to free up some of the single family housing stock in Marquette, especially given the new land development code. There's opportunities to take existing houses and create duplexes of them, or create a small unit in the backyard. So this kind of activity adding to the market will generate, there's a little activity through the course of the whole spectrum of the market. So,
assuming that none of these homes are built or are bought for second homes or any of those sort of trends that we're seeing in the community.
Yeah, the housing is a much bigger issue, and I will tell you, our firm is working with a couple developers here. We are desperately trying to come up with some nice little tiny house developments, and you're going to be seeing this fairly soon, actually.
Hey Barry, one item I think you mentioned, and this surprised me a little bit, was the market for the One Marquette Place is significantly local folks. And so, you would think that potentially this is people that were coming up or buying second homes or whatever, but there's a significant number, at least in One Marquette Place, which is a comparable sort of product, are local folks.
Yes. It
surprised me.
It's the majority are local. Yes. The other question or comment you had was about the public improvements, and yes, that would be going through a process. But I'm assuming headed up by the DDA as to how that's done, what forms those actually take. We see that as we move through this process, that those elements would go through a design charrette process locally. So that answers the question.
Jack, do you mind just speaking to whether brownfield funds can be used to help with housing and sort of like those mechanisms? Does it have to be spent on a parking deck?
Brownfield funds have to be spent on eligible activities. Parking deck is obviously a major, eligible activity, but there isn't an ability for us to write down part of the construction cost or any of those other items. We're limited to just funding eligible activities, both on the environmental side and non-environmental side. So this, the public infrastructure component is kind of the one area of brownfield where you can pay for construction costs, but it is limited to basically stormwater management, other public improvements, sidewalks, parks, those sorts of things. But we are limited in providing funding or reimbursing for costs related to other construction that isn't related to public infrastructure.
And I would just add, there was a comment about walkability as well. And, I think any high dense downtown development for housing is going to really promote the walkability and hopefully the need to not have cars someday. And I think that's just a thing that we see. We have, like I said, we have 5 buildings in downtown Houghton, all of which have a housing component towards them. And, we see that those residents, most of the time, a lot of times don't have cars, or if they have cars, they park them in long-term parking far away from where they live. I think that's a huge component to having, housing downtown.
I have a couple comments. One, just as background, by profession, I'm a wildlife biologist, and I moved to the Upper Peninsula because I wanted to be away from people. And I moved right into the most densely populated part of the UP. So I'm all about habitats. I'm all about, let's not build things everywhere in the world. But why I love this project and what we do in Brownfield, and what is, I think, widely misunderstood by a lot of the Marquette public, is that the best way to, if what you care about is habitats, the best way to protect them is to have dense downtown, attractive developments, and the ability to use those by the community. And I see this as sort of a part of a pyramid, and this goes to some of what Barry was saying. I mean, some places are going to be dense and expensive, and it's part of the way. I mean, maybe it's not the way it has to be theoretically, but the way our country is built, that's sort of part of what has to happen. You can't probably have affordable housing in downtown Chicago. So, I mean, maybe you can, but probably not through Brownfield. So anyway, I think there are 2 major obstacles that I see for this project that I think are both addressable and both can be handled. One is, I can already tell you've put a lot of thought into, how to tap into those things which brownfields care about, the public access and the public parking, and having these extra things. That's all very clever and good. That's a good idea. I'm sure you'll also be working with MAC to make sure that we are thinking about whatever it is that the MEDC might not like. Because I know this is a very different kind of project than the Burger King bank thing where they had objections, but we should be thinking about, well, what might MEDC not like or like, and if there are any clever things we can do to help them get over hurdles, we should do that. And I don't have anything specific, but just, keep that in mind. And then second, almost no matter what, we know there will be some pushback from some parts of the community, and maybe even from people on the commission, city commission, and on this board. So one of the things we have to do is we have to articulate why there are advantages to this, other than for rich people. There are advantages here for rich people, and that's fine. But we have to explain why this does many other things, like what Barry articulated about how this helps the housing market in some ways, in indirect ways, how obviously the biggest component is this parking deck, which we know there's this critical need. And I know there are issues about walkability and all of that, and that's a big policy issue. But there are aspects of this that I think that we can describe in ways that will help a greater proportion of the population accept it. And there are ways that we can describe this that will cause backlash. And so those are my 2 comments. Think about MEDC and how we can, are there any tweaks? Are there any additions or subtractions that might help there? And then, to the extent that this does start to move forward, if you do get support from the commission and DDA and us, how do we describe this to the Marquette public, and not hide the fact that there are things that some people aren't going to like, and they will legitimately not like them, and that's okay. But how do we describe that there are positives too, and positives maybe for more people than people realize? And so those are my 2 broad brush comments. I'm still very excited about this. I think you have put a lot of thought into the brownfield aspects of it. And I personally am encouraged. So
Cool.
that's my 2 cents for now.
And I'll add to, yes, we've been working with Jennifer Tucker and the MEDC from the very beginning. There was actually Jen was, I think, the first, maybe the second. Becky at the DDA was maybe the first. Jen was probably the second person to actually see these plans. And they're very excited about it. Checks a lot of their boxes, just like we kind of did with Brownfield. We made sure that we're looking at the things that they're very interested in. And they have pitched it in their weekly, meeting, and they got a lot of support for it. And I think, the advantages for the community here are huge. Part of the brand of the Vault Hotel is being in a downtown central location. And part of it is we're trying not to be a full service hotel. We are going to have a small lounge with small plates on the lower level on Lakeshore Boulevard. And we're going to have this event space, but we're working with our neighboring properties and our neighboring business owners to help fill those spaces. We're not looking to come to town and open a new restaurant. We're looking to work with the existing restaurateurs to expand on their success. And I think, as any successful downtown will see, is when you build a hotel in the heart of downtown, it is going to benefit all of those businesses. The average traveler spends 20% of their money on their hotel and 80% of their money elsewhere in a community. And I think when you put those heads and those beds in central locations like we are, the benefit to those businesses, whether it's Dockers, whether it's, whoever it is, up Washington, down Washington, up Front Street, there's going to be, I promise there will be a significant impact a positive impact on their businesses as we start bringing more of these guests into this location. We're not building a hotel up on the hill where we have to build an Applebee's and a Buffalo Wild Wings in front of it to support the hotel. We're building the hotel where those assets exist, and we're trying to make sure those assets are very successful with us in a collaborative way, such as the Verling and Elizabeth's being right next door. So those are great comments though, Perry. I appreciate that.
But David, I've got just a couple of quick slides that I can run through kind of from a Brownfield context, if that would be helpful, if that's not too much. But yeah, I think just to echo, this really is what MEDC, this is the poster child, I would say, for an MEDC project. Downtown historic renovation, public asset, walkability, all those features really hit the market. I'll go through this quickly. I think many of you may have seen this, but I'll zip through it kind of quickly if I can get there. Are you kind of seeing that dual display thing? Or are you seeing the whole? Nonetheless.
It's dual.
There we go. And I'll say, I think kind of in summary, we've got this big project. It's got a public parking facility. There really is a need for a brownfield plan and work plan. It is located in both the DDA and LDFA districts, so we have to have an interlocal agreement between the Brownfield Authority, the DDA, and the LDFA. So that's one of the agreements that will have to be negotiated. You, of course, would review and approve the Brownfield plan, and the City Commission would as well. And there's lots of significant arrangements and agreements that have to be made to work through this. It's a complex project. I'll say kind of in the end, I think, and this is a simplistic view, but in essence, the community gets a free parking deck paid for by, constructed by somebody else inside that minimizes costs that the state is going to pay half of. So that's sort of the the bonus there, in this project. The rest of like John said, this development could move forward in another shape, in another form, but this really creates a pretty significant opportunity for the state to pay for half of a downtown parking deck that provides an effective 220 spaces. So again, we got the plan. We've got what we're seeing right now, and we're trying to develop this framework of agreements. There'd be the standard reimbursement agreement between the Brownfield Authority and the developers. We'll see if the city's involved there, and especially in terms of the park activities. And then there'd be a development agreement, and this brings up nightmares for Barry, but we have a lot of conversation from the time when there was going to be a similar arrangement for Founders Landing, a publicly funded parking deck built by private developers there. It's a little bit different, a little more, that arrangement was a little bit different, but we've got a pretty good foundation, I think, of an agreement with many changes, but we have some experience in trying to work through some of those details. And so I think we can move through that. And then, finally, there'd be an operating agreement with the DDA that would include the hotel and residential revenues, how that kind of works out, whether it's permit-based, whether it's lease-based, how that manages. I think probably the easiest way is that they treat them like a customer. I'm familiar with downtown Traverse City decks where you buy a permit. Downtown businesses buy a permit for their employees. They park there and can park anywhere. In the building, it may be a similar kind of arrangement. Hotel guests get a card or some token or ability to get in, and the residents have the same thing. We talked a little bit about that. Effectively, the residential units would probably park in the lower level. They wouldn't need their own reserve space, could be overflow, but it would, in effect, provide a space for them to park. So the developers construct the facility along with the rest of the building with design input and construction review by a parking consultant hired by the city, DDA, Brownfield Authority, however that kind of works. So there'd be, an active engagement to make sure that that design works out well and we don't end up with high operating costs at the end because of a design flaw, for lack of a better term, that wasn't considered in that piece. Once that building is fully completed, the Brownfield Authority issues bonds with the city's full faith and credit and then purchases the public parking facility. So it's like a condo. We'd have an agreement for purchase in the development agreement. All of the things would be laid out. Once that is completed, it's inspected, it's approved, all those things are done. And the building is built. That's the huge advantage of this, is the building is already built, so we know the revenues will be there. We're not speculating and building a deck and then hoping that a building is built above it. The building is all completed and the bonds are issued and do that. The bond payments would be in first position for the Brownfield TIF revenue. It's most of the eligible activities there as well. And then developers would receive the balance to pay off any private eligible activities. I'll show you that we've got some work to do on the revenues and financing based on those costs. But this is my perspective as well. I think there's a strong advantage here to this integrated parking facility as opposed to the DDA finding a piece of property and building its own parking deck with only local revenues. This integrated parking really provides a great opportunity. It meets that downtown strategy and which prioritize joint development opportunities. It's essentially enclosed, so it really minimizes weather wear, which has been a problem with some other decks in town. There's some cost savings because it's integrated with the building. It's not a standalone feature. The footings and foundations are part of the building as well. So the allocation of cost to the deck is lower. It doesn't require separate public property for public parking, as I mentioned. It's constructed by a private developer with our advice, which kind of minimizes the city's risk and the Brownfield Authorities. Purchases a condo unit when it's all completed. That assured revenue stream is there. And importantly, key is that the state brings in 46% of the dollars to fund the project. And as was mentioned, the hotel and parking needs at night fit well with public parking needs during the day and even potentially for the residents as well. So that kind of integration or that flow can really maximize the utilization of the lot. Environmental eligible activities, and these are the ones that we can pay for. Kind of depending on the phase 2 environmental assessment, which is currently underway, there may be some need for environmental response activities. Was a former railway and had some other operations on the site as well. There's a little bit, I think, and John may do this, I think they want to preserve as much of the building as possible, interior of the building as possible. But anytime you do disturb an area, you have to have an asbestos and lead paint inspection for that area. And so there might be a little bit of demolition involved there. Some site preparation, obviously building a major building like this in a downtown location, you have to protect the utilities and roads in that. And there may be a potential for special foundations. We've included that in here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the public parking facility and parking improvements. One kind of important piece is Barry led to is that most of the plan is for the public non-environmental eligible activities. Depending again on that phase 2 environmental assessment, We've included here an allocation for contaminated soil disposal and a vapor mitigation system. Hopeful that vapor mitigation would not be necessary and would be a reduction. There's about 1.5 million in private non-environmental activities, again, related to site preparation. And then this is a contingency for special foundations. So if those two items are not necessary, if the soils are good enough to build on, which we believe is the case, and there's no need for vapor mitigation, that percentage of public non-environmental eligible activities even increases. So this is just a quick list we have so far of the basis. Again, that's the soil removal and vapor mitigation that's there as well, along with contingencies, interest, and all of those activities. On the non-environmental side, these are the activities of site preparation that are private. In addition, there's allocated costs for stormwater management, some of the green roof, which is an eligible activity as well there, and then the pedestrian improvements, park improvements, and of course the integrated public parking facility is the big ticket item. This is just a quick graphic representation of the revenues that would be available for this. 54% local and 46% state. And if the facility is bonded, at $7.2 million over 25 years at 5%, this yellow area kind of represents the bond payments. So as you can see, it's a little bit short in the beginning. This is $30,000 there. There's a little bit of coverage because we're not buying the building until it's complete. We're not buying the parking deck until it's completed. So there's some dollars we'll probably allocate from this to make sure that those costs are covered. And then again, the developer receives fairly small reimbursement until that bond is paid off, and then the allocation is paid off. Hopeful that these are more conservative numbers, that the eligible activity costs will go down and revenues will increase, but it is a big nut there for the public parking, and represents a large percentage of the brownfield TIF. I'll kind of go quickly through the.
Before you go on to that, I just wanted
Yeah.
to, quick question. I know that Commissioner Stonehouse had some particular concern about reaching some sort of ceiling on the city's ability to issue bonds, that the total amount. I don't know if either Sean or Mac, if you know, A, how hard of a ceiling is it? B, how big of a deal is it really going to be? Does it seem manageable? I mean, I know it's a concern no matter what, but is there anything more you can say about that?
Yeah, I kind of took that slide out because it's sort of, it hasn't gone away, but we believe after some analysis, it's more manageable, especially if it was going to be issued this year. If the bonds are going to be issued this year, along with the pier and Lakeshore Boulevard, that's when things started to bump up.
Okay.
It's 10% of the SEV, which I believe gets to $90 million worth of outstanding principal. And with the capital improvements program, plus, I mean, we've got about 30 million in the improvements for DLP. So that was a big chunk. The Municipal Services Center at 18 and about 10 or 11 for roads. So that's that's a big chunk about that is unique in the situation. But that is a hard cap. You cannot issue bonds above that number. But a number of bonds will be paid off as well in this time frame, in this 2-year time frame. So it's something to watch and something to manage. And primarily because of DLP, we're in that range along with the other couple of big projects. But thanks for raising that, David. So I'll just go quickly. I think you guys are aware of the interlocal agreements there. We only have access to capture ISD and school taxes, and the state requires that local taxes are captured for the projects. So these interlocal agreements are negotiated. We've had one with the DDA and one with the LDFA to conduct that. We have still conversations to go with both of those folks as well. And as I mentioned, the agreements, we have the standard brownfield reimbursement agreement. We have that development agreement. I include the city in there just because this will be a Brownfield Authority bond. It'll be backed by the full faith and credit of the city. They may not be a party or seeking reimbursement on any of these items, so they may not be a party, but they'll certainly want, because they're, bankrolling it, they're co-signing on the loan. We certainly have, need to make sure that all of those considerations are done. And then an operating agreement, basically the Brownfield Authority will own, for the life of the bonds, will own the facility, and then an operating agreement with the DDA that includes those hotel and residential revenues, however that works out. So these are, the brownfield reimbursement is pretty straightforward. The development agreement, operating agreement are kind of new, that we'll have to work through quite a number of details there. So we're having, kind of these introductions, and then going through, again, we looked at a more aggressive schedule early on, but everybody felt like it was more effective to make certain that we have introductions. I mean, our original schedule was the brownfield plan was going to be before you today, but we want to kind of make sure that all of the comments are done, going to be going to the DDA and the LGFA as well, and then beginning in June to come back. I've sort of kicked in a little bit different date in June, and we can talk about that. That also is the DDA meeting, so that may not work. I moved that a week up so that all of the activities that the City Commission can know that the Brownfield Authority is supportive of the project before they set the public hearing. So we can talk a little bit about that schedule and what might need to happen there. And then on into the end of June for that approval, and then the DDA would approve the interlocal agreement at their meeting July 1st. The MSF approval, I think, we can get the letter of intent potentially, earlier, that would kind of provide some assurance, but the actual approval would be August, September, maybe even in October of that assurance, but activities can be conducted prior to their approvals. So that's kind of quick for me, or not so quick maybe, but it kind of hopefully provides the background on the brownfield side and what we have to look forward to over the next few months.
Any questions for anybody? By anybody? We can't hear you, Rob. I think you have to get closer to your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Mac, would it be hard to pull together a schedule that showed the all of our the bond plans over the next, 10, 20 plus years? I think that's an important, what do I call it? Outlook, I'll say. If we've got a max and we're on the knife's edge.
Yes, yeah, we're working with Gary and Mary on putting together all that information. We have to do that for the City Commission as well, so we'll provide that and prepare that report. So, yep, that kind of lays out all the payments. The principal, it's the principal that is the key factor in terms of that cap limit, but we'll provide those for both brownfield and for the city capital improvement program is their predominant one.
The DLP bond be getting paid back on an accelerated schedule, right?
They're still laid out like a mortgage. They'd have to be restructured or refinanced in that way. We have more money that can be, we can either bank that money and then pay off the bonds completely, kind of depending on the terms of the bonds. I'm pretty sure that you can call them after 10 years, certainly after 10 years, usually after 5. So we may just say, okay, we want to be done with those more quickly and refinance or pay them off, or just allow those bonds to be paid off, pretty good rates, it may be advantageous, and then the balance of the dollars just go back to the taxing jurisdictions. But that's a financial question or analysis. But yeah, we got a lot more money at DLP than we projected in the brownfield plan. Not that we thought we were going to get, but what we projected.
Anybody else have questions or comments? I'll just make one more comment that, I don't see any of these complications as even necessarily a red flag from my perspective. I think they're complicated issues, but they all seem manageable. So, to the extent that if all the different jurisdictions like this project and want to move it forward, I'm confident we can make all of these kinds of arrangements work. They don't seem particularly more difficult than some of the very complicated things we've done in the past. So I remain, as before, encouraged. Anybody else on this? Go ahead, Rob.
who actually owns the physical parking garage once it's constructed and funded?
You do, as a matter of fact. Congratulations. Whoever issues the bonds owns it for the life of the bonds. And so, but likely it would be transference to the DDA. I mean, the DDA could issue the bonds as well, and we could reimburse the DDA. They have the same capacity as the Brownfield Authority. It probably would be a little bit better since, we're capturing and, keeping that in-house, but more than likely, I would imagine that the Brownfield Authority would own it for the life of the bonds, and upon the retirement of the bonds, that it would be transferred to the DDA or the city. And I'm not sure who owns the current decks, whether that's DDA or city.
Since I own it, I get a parking space down there?
Yeah. If you buy a permit, we'll get you space there, no problem.
Okay. Anything else? All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. That was very informative, very helpful. We look forward to hearing more details as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise.
Okay. All right, so I still don't see Mary. So we'll go to Mac's invoices next. So we have looks like 3 invoices totaling $3,210. Looking for a motion to approve that. Matt, looking for a second. Rob, any questions? Okay, all in favor, say yes or raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. That passes. And Sherry, I'll sign this and scan it and email it to you.
Awesome, thanks.
David, I think if you want, we can go back to just item 5B, the amendments to the budget. That's an action.
Oh yeah.
item.
Okay. Sure.
The other would be.
I was gonna give everybody a chance to talk about the financial report in that before we're done. So, but let's do that now. Let's go back and let's talk about both of those things. First of all, if just anybody has any issues they want to raise about the financial report that they have, and then think about that while Mac tells us what he wants to tell about the amendments to the budget.
First, if I may, I just wanted to say goodbye. I'm going to have to take off here. So
All right, thanks, Sherry.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Sure.
So Mac, do you have something you want to say about the budget amendments? Or
Yeah, these are budget amendments that were not included in the previous budget, but were activities that that had occurred from the time of the budget related to the customs house, and those are the deposits for the brownfield plan as well. And so a revenue adjustment and an expenditure adjustment within that for customs house. And the same is true with the UP State Bank for those deposits provided by developers to pay my exorbitant fees. So that's the adjustment on those. I think that Duke Life Point, if I'm not mistaken, is that the taxes, again, after looking, there was an adjustment to the way that the taxes were being assessed and captured, including personal property. And we kind of found that by looking through some of the details for some of those pieces. And so there's an adjustment for those revenues to come in as well on that side. And then you may recall we held some of the dollars over from the previous year, waiting for invoice documentation about that $1.3 million. And then that was included in that 2.6 million payment to DLP. So those are just the adjustments kind of in and out that need to be made to the budget, the current year budget.
And do we need to take any action, or is this just for information?
I think it would be appropriate to approve the budget adjustments.
All right. Okay. So then, and do you think, well, Sherry's not here. Mac, do you think it also makes sense for us to go ahead and approve the Mary's report, even though she's not here? Okay. So
sure.
We'll do this in 2 motions then. So first, I'm looking for a motion to approve, and we'll have discussion if you have further questions. Looking for a motion to approve these budget adjustments that Mac just described. Callie. Oh, okay. Hey, Mac, are you keeping track of these motions for sure? Okay, thank you.
And the other nice part is it's on YouTube and recorded. So
right. But I don't have to go back and watch it. But looking for a second. Matt? Okay, any questions about these budget adjustments that Mac just described? Any issues?
So Mac, I'm trying to figure out, does this put us in the, like, these were surpluses, right? It looks like on the one line, we got maybe 12,500, on the other, we got 10,000.
Yes. Those are additional revenues, yep, that are there.
Right.
And then to cover the expenses for the brownfield plans for both Customs House and UP State Bank.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand or say aye. All opposed, same sign. That passes. And now I'm looking for a motion to approve Mary's treasurer's report. Matt, looking for a second. Rob, does anybody have any questions? It looked pretty straightforward again this month. Any questions at all? Okay. All in favor, say yes or raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. That passes. Okay, that brings us to public comments, and we still don't have anybody, right, Sean, on the.
I do have one written comment that was submitted a little bit late.
Okay.
But I told him I'd read it. Good morning, MBRA committee. My name is Antonio Adon, and I reside at 111 East Baraga Avenue in downtown Marquette with my wife, Christina Behrens. We own 2 tax parcels that include a building on the corner of East Baraga Avenue and Lakeshore Boulevard. Thank you, BraveWorks and team, for your consideration and investment into downtown Marquette. I would like additional clarification on the financial liability of the city of Marquette, MBRA, and any other key public entities that would take on with the vault project plans. I first learned about this significant project a week ago via the City Commission online meeting replay. At that time, there was no public comment after the presentation during the public comment portion. How can that be for such a large project? The purchase and rehabilitation of the historic Savings Bank building and Lakeshore Community Mixed-Use Development has the potential to become an exciting project and example of private and public partnership if the Brownfield project priority policy is followed. As a resident of downtown for 3 years, I welcome smart development that all residents can enjoy for many years and generations to come. However, I would like further clarification as to the funding component that be worked in through this committee. In my opinion, this project plan should have much more public engagement and additional input from the community at large before we consider redeveloping a key corridor in the city. Specifically, I have concerns about the city of Marquette and DDA being on hook for a period of 25 years with 0 tax revenue to fund a parking garage, hotel, and 36 market rate units. Additionally, as outlined in the Brownfield project priority policy, we need to encourage a diversity of housing options, including affordable and workforce housing. I serve as a volunteer on the City of Marquette Ad Hoc Housing Committee, and one of our goals is to better understand and provide recommendations as it relates to identifying housing affordability in the City of Marquette. Unfortunately, as you are all aware, Marquette has become increasingly unaffordable with real housing stock shortages. I would like to see more information from the developer in a public presentation and multiple opportunities for visioning sessions, public input in the form of questionnaires/surveys, and in-person engagement when deemed safe as to how this development committee would address housing affordability issues that impact the fabric of the community. Munising, Michigan had over 1 million visitors last year during a record pandemic year, and I'm concerned that if we allow more hotels and density to be developed at the expense of taxpayers in order to incentivize development and not provide residents with better housing options, we would be doing our community a great disservice. I hope that the developer takes steps to resolve immediate housing needs that Marquette residents, seniors, and families need today. Thank you.
Thanks. That's the only public comment?
It looks like Mark rejoined. I'm not sure if he has anything. Just
Mark, do you have a public comment? If you said so, I couldn't hear you.
Hey, Mark, did you hear?
Well, I just got connected. I lost my internet connection, so.
Okay. You don't have a comment? You have a public comment?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. All right.
I'm good.
So we're to comments from directors, and I already had my one shot. I'll just say one more quick thing before I go around the screen. And I'm not going back and forth with public comments, but I just want to note for anybody in the public that there obviously will be many, many more opportunities for public interaction and public comment on this vault project we've been talking about. I mean, we're has to go through many, many steps through many, many different public agencies before it would ever be finalized. So there will certainly be opportunities, required opportunities for public comment. And in addition, as I mentioned earlier, I'm looking for opportunities to have even more than usual for this to help the communication with the public. So just everyone in the public should know there will be many, many opportunities. Okay. Matt, any comments today from you?
Matt or Mac? Matt, me?
Matt, sorry, Matt, you.
Yeah, I can never tell.
I was looking right at you.
Yeah, right. No, I think you tend to steal the words out of my brain the last few years, so I don't need to be redundant just to talk. I still think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how this actually all works, and I think the long-term effects, and then some residual effects you don't necessarily see right off the bat. So I think, as always, we have a communication and education gap that needs to be continually improved. We're not paving paradise and putting up a parking lot. We're covering up a parking lot that already existed. So I could go on. I'm going to leave it at that. But
Thanks.
That's my comment.
Callie?
Yeah, Matt, I felt the same way. David, I'm encouraged by your last comment about more opportunities for public engagement. I think that there's an opportunity to rethink how you're communicating, especially the market rate component. And the reason I'm asking those questions is because I have a hunch that the community will. So thinking through those, like how you're communicating that. And if you have explored a blend of housing units, I agree that getting people downtown is great for our community and activating those spaces, but so is bringing in a mix of income types and diversity of backgrounds. So, I get that you need to make the development pencil. I understand all of those things, but just think through how you're communicating that, and for the board to do that as well, because we are approving a lot of market rate units along the lakeshore. And from a community livability standpoint, I think that there are concerns.
Thanks, Callie. Rob?
I'll get back to your opening remarks, David, regarding vaccination. I joined Team Pfizer about 2 months ago. I'm ready to see y'all again. Looking forward to having a meeting in person once the city approves it. So if anybody was looking at my thoughts on it, I'm ready to meet in person, but I think maybe the city should consider, maybe a period of flexibility or something where those that are ready to be in the room together are, and those that need to dial in can. I also can tell you now that my employer knows that I'm vaccinated, I've been on the road a lot more. Again, I've been to West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and probably some other places in the last month. So having this flexibility dial in might be very helpful as well, just to increase and broaden board participation. I see right now we're barely making the quorum with 4 of us on here. Looks like Dennis had to drop off. So I encourage maybe some feedback to the commission that this some element of this flexibility continue to be woven into board participation, because I know it'll be important to me. And unfortunately, I got to put being employed and putting food on my table and paying my mortgage ahead of being part of Brownfield. So anyway, it's my 2 cents on being able to dial in. And I think we do have Marquette has a long history of being a waterfront focused manufacturing committee. And that puts us in the middle of, this kind of philosophical argument of, there's a lot of brownfield eligible properties that in waterfront communities don't typically get developed for low income housing or even middle for that matter. So we are getting thrusted into the middle of that conversation, even though, there's probably some other parcels that would be more naturally suited on just on an economics analysis on having lower or middle income housing that wouldn't be near the waterfront. But we get put into the middle of this conversation because this is Marquette's history. The brownfield properties, by and large, are a relic of lakeshore industrial development. So I do fully support and want to be a positive force in making sure that Marquette has that full suite of housing. But we're at just a disadvantaged point just due to the nature of where brownfields are in Marquette. And we don't often get a chance to put money towards non-lakeshore development. That's where Marquette's brownfields are, by and large. So I don't have a solution to that, but I just want to step back for a moment and just acknowledge that we're being put into that situation because of 170 years of how Marquette was previously developed.
Thanks, Rob.
Just real quick, I think due to HIPAA or whatever, you're not supposed to ask people if they're vaccinated. I've been for a couple months, willing to get that out there, and I'd love to have in-person meetings again. That's why I got a shot. So, anyways.
Thanks. Anybody else have anything today?
David, I just want to add on to something that Rob said, and it's interesting. Just thought we've been working on another project on another property to really focus on workforce housing that is up on McClellan Avenue, and trying to make something happen. But we have to go through a little bit of a machination to make it qualify for brownfields because it's not brownfield eligible property. You got to transfer it to the Land Bank Authority, then it automatically becomes brownfield eligible. So it just kind of hit me when Rob said that, is that there's brownfield eligible property, but we have to, in order to participate in a really great opportunity and great project, we have to do a little bit of calisthenics, to make it qualify, and to do that. We're working on that. We're trying to make that happen, in some early conversations. But it's just sort of an interesting thought. I thought that Rob had, and that effort in other places where that really doesn't qualify, but there's a way to make it happen. So, and hopefully we'll be bringing that forward soon.
And again, I think there's a very pragmatic part of all this. I think we should always, as a brownfield committee, look for ways to tack in the direction of our priorities, always. But the amount that we can tack in that direction is limited by practicality. So we can't make every project hit every priority as much as we would ideally like, but we can always tack in that direction. So I think it's a great conversation. It's like, is there anything that we can do with any of these projects we're talking about to make the affordable housing a bigger component, to make public access a bigger component, to make future taxes better? All of these advantages, how do we improve in that direction? We should never just say, well, we're not going to worry about it. We should always worry about it. But that doesn't mean that every project does every single thing that we hope for. And so that's the balancing act. So great conversation.
Along those lines, I don't think it has to be all market rate or all affordable housing. There's a blend that can happen too. Right.
We also, through the support of some, I'll call them the Marquette's Brownfield Development Authority's flagship projects, we're going to have a significant fund available in 10 plus years. It's not available to us now, but we've made some. The past brownfield, I think, made some really strategic moves, and there's going to be a war chest available, in the upcoming years where we could divert funds towards projects that don't make sense, on the bottom line, but could be incentivized, via brownfield with some of these other, hallmark projects. So maybe in the long term, what might end up happening is, Lakeshore Development plus Duke Life Point ends up funding some of these other projects that just can't make it or stand alone on their own.
Yeah. Great. I agree. Anything else from anybody? All right, in that case,